And welcome to today's webinar, Kainos Smart, Automated Testing for Workday Implementations. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce Mark Carroll, Sales Executive, and Will Murray, Head of Professional Services, Kainos.
Thank you very much, Jill, and thank you all for attending. My name is Mark Carroll and I'm an account executive with Kainos Smart, and as Jill mentioned, I'm also joined by my colleague Will Murray, who heads up our professional services team. So I'm aware that there are people logged in from multiple time zones ranging from Europe right across to the west coast of the US, so thank you very much for giving up your time today. I hope you get great value out of today's webinar. So, in today's session, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Kainos as a company, and then I'm going to go through the background of the Kainos Smart product. Then I will hand you over to my colleague Will, and he's going to bring you through a live demonstration of the product. I'll then bring you through some of the benefits you can expect from Kainos Smart, and then time permitting at the end we'll be answering questions, so please feel free to submit them through the chat feature throughout. If we don't have time, we'll be able to follow up with you individually after. So, Kainos started in 1986 out of Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland. So through the years, we have worked with over 150 global customers, and that's primarily out of the UK and Europe, but through Smart, the number of US and global customers is increasing. So currently we have over 650 employees, and they're based at 4 main sites. Our headquarters is in Belfast, Northern Ireland. We have offices in Dublin and London, and then a development centre in Gdansk in Poland. So our Workday practice comprises of over 80 professional consultants, and our Workday practice is a key area of focus for Kainos as we move into the future. So why is Kainos in a unique position to offer a product like Smart? So if we step back for a moment and take a look at the Workday solution. So it's a cloud-based solution. Workday have over 750 customers. Every customer is on the same version of code, and every customer has a testing requirement. So what credentials Kainos to fill that particular gap? So first off, we are automated testing experts. So as I mentioned, we've been in existence for over 28 years. So we've long before we moved into the Workday ecosystem, we were providing automated test consulting to our blue chip clients. So we have a heavy skill base in automated testing. We are also Workday implementation partners ourselves, and we implement Workday primarily in the UK and Europe. So we've been able to feed that knowledge from our experienced Workday team into the Kainos Smart product. So we are also software solution specialists, and although we were traditionally an IT services company, we've incubated a number of products in-house and successfully brought them to market. So finally, the most important piece of this jigsaw puzzle, we are Workday's primary testing partners. So we currently have 25 Kainos employees who work as part of the internal QA test team in Workday, and these people test new functionality and updates been released. So a very key point of that relationship is that through it we've early access to new Workday functionality coming downstream, and that allows us to keep Smart Selenium automation, which sits in the background, current with any Workday updates. So in a nutshell, what is Smart? So Smart is an acronym that stands for Scalable, Measurable, Automated, Repeatable Testing. So Smart is a test automation suite, and it's only designed for Workday implementations. So it's also specifically designed for the business user, So that means as an end user of Smart, you don't need to know or have the technical expertise of JavaScript or .NET to maintain any of the automation. That's Kainos' job. As a customer, all you need to do is upload your own specific data through the interface, which Will's going to take you through in a minute. So what functionality can be tested via Smart? So the first piece that Will is going to bring you through is the business process functionality. This is the core HCM business processes such as hire, termination, job change, request comp change, and so on. And we also released security functionality in July of this year. So this enhancement allows our clients to automatically test and validate their security configurations within Workday. So this is a very high value test function, and it's one that a lot of our clients have requested. So there is also the ability within Smart to automatically test your Workday integrations. So this is through an integrations comparison utility where you can compare single and multi-file comparisons. So we're going to go through all this when we jump into the live system in a moment. So here you can see a list of just some of the companies using Kainos Smart. So to date we actually have 20 clients. We've seen phenomenal growth since we launched last year, and this momentum is continuing as we add enhancements to the product. So how does Kainos Smart work? So any company that is testing their Workday implementation through a manual process has a team of testers, and those testers are lifting a set of test scenarios, opening up a browser, navigating to the Workday tenant, and then inputting those scenarios and verifying the actual results against their expected results. So when you use Kainos Smart, it's exactly the same. So the test scenarios that you would have executed manually are inputted into Smart, and then Smart opens up multiple browsers in the cloud, navigates to your own Workday tenant, and executes those same scenarios. But because this is automation, Smart can do that much faster and more efficiently. So, and with that, I'm going to hand you over to Will, who's now going to take you through a live demonstration of the system.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark mentioned, I'm going to show you a live demonstration here. So what I'm going to do is just jump out of the presentation itself and open up Smart. So what you're seeing here is our Kainos Smart demo environment, but each of our clients actually receives their own instance of Kainos Smart. So that would mean that your own organization would get the organization's name .kainosmart.com. We would then provide you with your admin user, and you would go in and create your own users and your own tenants. So let me log in and show you exactly what that means. So I've signed in here to Kainos Smart. Now the first thing that you're brought to is your landing page. Now your landing page consists of any test runs that you've actually previously ran. So as you can see in this instance, there are some test runs here that I'll be referencing back to later. As I mentioned, we allow you to configure Smart to point at a number of different types of Workday tenants, and we do that through the tenant management section of Smart. Smart can point at any implementation or implementation preview tenants for people who are pre-go live, and any sandbox or sandbox preview tenants for post-go live customers. As you can see in this demonstration, I have a number of them configured there. So again, let me flick back to the Kainos Smart landing page. When I think about how to use Kainos Smart, I think of it about three different things that need to be done. The first one, and this is the same for any testing, whether it's automated or manual. First one is deciding on what tests you want to run and the associated test data with them. Secondly, you need to execute those tests. And thirdly, you need to go in and verify that the results of those tests are as you expected. And if not, make some changes in your Workday tenant or to your data depending on what you're seeing or not seeing, and reuse the tests and run again, continuing over to verify the results. So let me show you how to do step one, creating your test data, deciding on what you want to test and how to create it. So within Smart, we have a tool called the Wizard-based Test Case Creation Tool, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll refer to it as WBTC from now on. So clicking on the Create tab, you can see Create Test Cases, and I'm just going to click on that. Now what I'm shown here is a list of test areas within Workday and business processes that I can select from to create test data for. Now from this list here, I'm just going to select the request one-time payment for this demonstration. Again, you can see that I can drop down and I can see all the tenants that I have configured Smart to point at. So for this demo, I'm going to be using our Kainos PT2 tenant and creating data and running tests against it. So I select that, and now I click on the build test data. So I always imagine when I get to this screen of what would I want to manually do within Workday to request a one-time payment. Well, the first thing is I need to decide who I want to log into Workday as to actually initiate that one-time payment. So I'm going to choose our good friend Logan McNeil here. As you can see, there was a type ahead there. She's the only Logan within the system, so Smart went ahead and actually auto-populated that. The next thing I want to do is to select the person that I actually want to request that one-time payment for. Now, one of the most important things about Smart and using WBTC is that WBTC is interacting directly with the tenant that I selected earlier. So in this case, the Kainos PT2 tenant. So anything that I see in type aheads or in searches, anything that's displayed on screen is coming back from the Kainos PT2 tenant, allowing me to select the exact data for that tenant that I actually want to use for my testing. So in this case, I'm going to select Ian Murray, who's no relation, but there we go. So now what I'm shown on screen is a list of fields. If you were requesting a one-time payment within Workday, these are the fields that you would need to supply data for to actually initiate a one-time payment. So if we look at this, first thing we need to supply is the effective date for the request one-time payment. By clicking in this field, I'm presented with a nice pop-out, so I can select the date that I want the one-time payment to be made. That's pretty good, but if I was to run this test in a month's time, that date is actually going to be out of date, and I'll probably get an error saying in Workday saying, you know, you can't request a one-time payment for a date in the past. So for all date fields, we have a little format button that I can click on. And what this does is it changes the date to today plus 17 days. Now this means that any time that I run this test, the date that will be used is today plus 17 days. It's really handy for a lot of our users who are running our tests over and over again so that they don't need to go in and keep making manual adjustments to the test data. So the next thing for my request one-time payment is to select a plan. Now, when I saw this first, it really excited me and interested me, which I think says more about me than it does about the test tool itself. But what I'm actually seeing here is a list of all the plans for one-time payments within my Kainos PT2 tenant. So with my tester hat on, I can look at these and say, you know, I want to test all these plans to ensure that they're going to the right place, that each of the plans is configured correctly, that if there's any business process conditions associated with them, that it will follow the right route. Or I can choose just to select one or two of them. So I'm going to select the spot bonus in this case. Again, by dropping down the reason drop-down, these are the reasons that have been configured within my Kainos PT2 tenant. There's nothing hard-coded here. These are happening in real time. So again, I'm going to select merit. So again, the next fields are required by Workday. Do we need to do payroll effect? Is it an amount or a percentage? And what amount do we want to give for our one-time payment? And what currency do we want to pay this in? So I'm going to select USD. Additionally, we can add in additional information if needed. Ian had a great month. And I'm going to click Next. Now that's all the data that Smart requires to initiate and run through a request one-time payment. For a one-time payment, the way that I have it configured within our Kainos PT2 tenant, the request one-time payment initiation step requires data, and after that any to-dos or approvals, consolidated approvals or services within Workday are handled automatically by Smart. So there's no need to put anything else in there. So let me put in a description here. So one-time payment for Ian Murray. So this is test metadata that I'm entering in here. So it's letting us show what we're expecting to see from this test. So the description of this test again is, I want to initiate a one-time payment for Ian Murray. Next thing, test case ID. Probably really good testing process to give each of your tests test case ID so that you can relate it back to any passes or even any incidents and what the expected result should be. Ian gets a time payment. Interestingly enough, we also give you the ability to rescind or cancel. Now, the difference between rescind or cancel is all got to do with your completion step within your request one-time payment business process. So anything before the completion step, if it doesn't get there, the process will cancel. Anything after the completion step, we will rescind. We find this most useful for people who want to run the same tests over and over again. So if you want to run a test, you don't want the data to actually be persisted within Workday, but you want to make sure that the results are correct. You can run the test through, verify the results, and the data is then rescinded out of Workday. But by going into the worker history, we'll be able to see that that data has been entered and that it has been rescinded out. So there's two ways of verifying that this has happened. One is through Smart, and the other, if you want to, is to go into Workday and verify it through the worker history. So next I'm going to click on Add Test Case. So what this has done is it's entered my test case into a little pool of test cases that I can create here. And again, I can continue on to create more and more tests in this manner if I want to meet all the conditions that I would like to test for my request one-time payment. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm not going to do that because I could be here all day. So I'm going to click on the Generate button. Now, clicking Generate is going to create an Excel spreadsheet for me. Now, this spreadsheet, when it opens up, contains the data that I've entered into Smart. So as we can see, fields or columns A to E are reference data. They tell you exactly what the data is associated with. What, as you can see, test case ID, should we rescind or cancel, who do I want to log in to do the request one-time payment. And column F is specifically the data that I have entered in through the WBTC. As you can see, it's I want to rescind and cancel. We're logging in as Logan McNeil. We're entering effective date of today plus 17 days for a one-time payment for Ian Murray, etc. Now, in the example I showed, we created one test within WBTC, but there's nothing to stop you creating as many tests as you want within WBTC, and these will all be shown in subsequent columns within Excel. There's also nothing to stop you creating one test and then actually copying that across a number of times and going in and maybe changing who I want to initiate the test, ensuring that we're doing very different tests very quickly and changing the conditions all the way across. So that is test case creation. That's how you build up your test data, decide on what you want to test, and create it into repeatable tests to be executed over and over again. So I'm not going to save that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to actually show you now the second stage, how to execute tests. So let me create, this time rather than test cases, I'm going to create a test run. And clicking on the Create Test Run allows me to see a long list of business processes and also integrations. For the benefit of this webinar, I'm going to select two different business processes that I've created earlier. One is a request leave of absence, and the other one will be a request one-time payment. So by clicking on those, we can see that they've moved over to the right-hand side of the screen. Now, these are the business processes that I want to test during this test run. I'm going to give it a logical name, so webinar September. Just make a little change there. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the test data files that I've previously created, exactly the same as the ones I showed you in Excel a minute ago, to each of these business processes. So I'm just going to select Upload Files. I'm going to set data file, and I'm going to browse to the exact location of the files that I've created earlier. So here we go. So this is request leave of absence. I'm going to click Done on that, and next I'm going to upload the request one-time payment file. And I'm going to click Done. I'm going to save our test run. As you can see, I'm brought back to the landing page and our test run is there, and then I'm going to select which Workday tenant I want to execute this test run against. So clicking on the Workday icon selects the tenants, as you've seen, that had been configured for Smart to work against. I'm going to select the Kainos PT2 tenant. I'm going to drop down the related action. I'm going to click execute. So nothing really exciting has happened on screen there. We can see that our test case, our test run has actually started executing, and by clicking into it we can see that there's 5 tests executing. So what's happening in the background? Well, what is happening in the background is Smart has actually spawned up 5 different instances of a browser in the cloud. Each of them has initiated Workday, and Smart is logging into Workday to go through the business processes that we've selected. So I have a little video here that I can show you exactly what's happening. So again, as I mentioned, in this video, this is a video of Smart doing a hire. So we've logged in as Steve Morgan, we've selected hire employee, and we're starting to enter in the data that had been supplied through the data template. Now, as you can see, this is reacting as quickly as Workday fields are appearing on screen. So there's no think time involved, there's no errors in typing, there's no coffee breaks involved. Smart is reacting with Workday as quickly as Workday can, entering in all the data until it gets to the end of the hire initiation. Now I've paused the video here to show you what happens next. So at this stage, Workday shows us that the next step in the business process is to be carried out by Logan McNeil and is to assign organizations. So it's at this stage that Smart interacts with Workday, it logs out, it logs in as Logan McNeil, it goes to the business process or sub-business process in question and continues to enter the data in. And it continues on in this manner, logging out and logging in as the next people in the business process flow until we get to the end of the business process and Smart has completed. Now we haven't told Smart where to go. Smart is interacting with Workday to find out which way the business process is actually configured, and it's following that path through. But the real power of Smart is that, as we've seen there, that was one browser being kicked off with one business process being executed. Smart can execute multiple business processes in multiple browsers at the same time. And this reduces the amount of manual effort and the amount of manual time that is actually needed. If you can imagine how long it would take to actually do potentially a hire, depending on how your business processes are configured, Smart will be able to do that in a much reduced time and in parallel with X number of other hires. So let me flick back to Smart and see what's happened. So I timed that well. While the video is showing, our test run has actually completed. Now let me just explain to you about the test files that I've uploaded for this test run. So as you can see, there are 3 leave of absences and 2 one-time payments. So you saw me uploading 2 spreadsheets. The request leave of absence had 3 columns in it, which indicated 3 tests with data in them, and the request one-time payment had 2 columns in it, which were 2 separate tests. So let's look at the request one-time payment first. My request one-time payment business process definition within our Kainos PT2 tenant has a condition rule associated with it. The condition rule says that if the one-time payment amount is greater than $100,000, a second approval is actually required. So first approval required if it's less than $100,000, I think it's by the HR partner. If it's over $100,000, the comp partner needs to approve. So how can we verify that that's happened? Again, remember, we only entered in the data to initiate this. We didn't specify that it needed to go down certain routes. What specified that was the amount that we actually entered, the amount less than 100,000 and the amount over 100,000. So let's look at the amount less than 100,000. By clicking on request one-time payment, we delve in and we can actually see what's happened. So our request one-time payment has been initiated by Jill Black. That's been completed. The next step in our one-time payment was an approval by our HR executive, who's Jamie Oliver, and as we can see here, he is a HR executive, so that's perfect. And what we've done is we've rescinded that business process, meaning I can run this over and over again. So if I go back to my test run and look at the second request one-time payment that I've entered, again, the only difference being that the figure that I've entered for the one-time payment is now greater than 100,000. So we click in and we can see again our request one-time payment has been initiated by Jill Black. Again, an approval by the HR executive is required, Jamie Oliver. But now we can see that a second approval is required by the compensation partner. Sam Neal, being the compensation partner, has done this approval, and we've gone on and rescinded. So by doing this, we have actually tested both sides of the condition rule of the greater than $100,000 requiring a second approval. So we're happy. Now let's look at what you may have noticed: 2 fails and a completed with warnings for request one-time absence. When I was looking at this, first of all, you get a little bit of a fright, but it's okay because these are actually negative tests that I have created. I'm expecting an error to happen. So let's first of all have a look at the request leave of absence for maternity leave. The test that I've created here is for Tammy Calhoun. Tammy Calhoun is not in our company for 6 months, and the condition rule for our request one-time payment for maternity leave states that the employee needs to be a female, but they also need to be in the company for greater than 6 months to be for maternity leave to be available to them. So let's go over and click on the little red status and see what happens. Well, Smart is actually showing us here exactly the message that has been displayed in Workday. So we can see it's exactly the message that we're expecting. The continuous service months is greater than or equal to 6 months, and it is a female. So Tammy doesn't actually meet these conditions. But how do we know that's actually what happened in Workday? Well, as you can see, there's a little screenshot here. So by clicking on that, Smart has captured a screenshot of Workday at the exact spot that this error has appeared. Let me just make that a tiny bit bigger on screen so everyone can see it. As you can see, the message that appears in Workday is exactly as Smart has output during the log files, and is exactly what we were expecting. So this is a positive result to a negative test. So let's now have a look at the completed with warnings. Again, I'm going to click on the request leave of absence and see what happened. The test data in this scenario was selecting bereavement leave. And again, I was expecting some warnings to appear. Again, clicking on the yellow tick, I can see exactly that Tammy is allowed to request this type of leave, but there's a message saying that it actually exceeds your balance. So again, this happens in Workday. It's just a little message to say, be careful, something's about to happen here, but you can continue on if necessary. Again, screenshot taken with exactly those details on screen. We can see that the business process has continued on, going to an approval, which is by Logan McNeil, the HR partner. Again, the warning message appears for Logan. She has the decision to either continue on or to reject this. She continues on, completes the review leave of absence, and completes the request leave of absence business process, at which case we rescind the process again. So that really is how we can run negative and positive tests. But as I've shown you here, our 5 tests are actually what we've expected, and we don't want to be reporting on fails or completed with warnings. So what we allow you to do is to set the results. Again, we know that this is what we were expected. It was a negative test and we got the correct error. So I can now go through and select passed for all the tests because I have verified that the expected results are as I expected. And by clicking on the results view, we can now show that we have 60% complete and 40% not complete, and that we have 100% on passed. Again, coming back out to our landing screen, this is now shown here as well with 3 of 5 complete and 5 of 5 passed. But probably one of the most interesting parts of Smart and most usable is our reuse functionality. So let me show you a test that I've created earlier, which is an end-to-end payroll integration test for August. Now I'm going to click on reuse here. By clicking on reuse, Smart will open up the test run that you've previously executed and allow you to make any changes or any updates to it. Now let me show you what I've done here. In this test run, I've created a hire, I've put in a request compensation change, a request one-time payment, and I want to run a payroll EIB. But rather than running these all at the same time, I've used our toggle sequence, which, as you can see, similar to Workday, allows me to sequence the tests so that they execute one after another. So hire will execute first, request compensation change and request one-time payment will execute at the same time, and only when they have completed will our EIB run. Now, this is quite interesting for how some of our clients are actually using Smart for end-to-end payroll integration tests. So as you can see, I've labeled this August. I have ran this test against Workday in August. I want to run exactly the same test for September. You can imagine this is Workday 22 going to Workday 23. I'm going to click Save on the test run. I can now reuse exactly the same test that I ran in August, except in September. I'm going to select my Kainos PT2 tenant, and I'm going to click Execute. So now, this is going to take a little while to execute, because if I click into it, you should be able to see that the hires are going to execute, or are going to go to current first, and only when these have completed, we'll get to the request compensation change and the request one-time payments, and only when they've completed will the EIBs kick off. So at the end of the day, what we want to test here is that the payroll file that's coming out of Workday for September is the same as the payroll file that was coming out for August. So the file for Workday 22 matches exactly the file for Workday 23. So let me run that, leave that running in the background, and let me show you how you can do that. So let's imagine that that file has now been created, and we have the payroll file for in August, Workday 22, and a payroll file for Workday 23. How do we know that those files are actually the same? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Create toggle again, and I'm going to click Integration Comparison. Now what this allows you to do is to select a number of different files that should be the same and compare them within Smart and actually validate and verify the results that come out. So again, I'm going to do Workday 22 v Workday 23 test. I'm going to select the files I want to compare. So again, let me just go back here, click into Integration Comparison, Payroll Outputs. So I have a file for August and I have a file for September. So I'm going to select, I want to select August and I want to compare that with September. I'm going to click on Save Test Run. Those files have been uploaded successfully. I'm going to go back to Smart. I'm just going to slightly update. As you can see, this has now been entered. And I don't need to select a Workday tenant here because I'm just doing a file comparison. I'm going to select to execute. So what Smart is now doing is it's comparing the two files that I have supplied it, and it's going to come back and tell me if there are any differences or if they're the same. So this will just take 2 seconds to actually run. As we can see, they're not the same. We've got a big red non-match. So by clicking on the payroll file, what Smart does is it opens up both files for me. It goes to the places in those files where they don't match, gives you a bit of reference, 10 lines either side, and highlights where those files don't match. So we can see that the output for August is different from the output from September. Now, this means we can go and investigate this. This may be okay because some changes have been made to your configuration, or it may not be okay that some changes have been made to your configuration and this shouldn't have happened. But it allows you very quickly and easily to identify any differences between one version and another and allow you to go in and make those changes very, very quickly. Again, rerun your payroll test by doing the hires, the request compensation changes, etc., rerunning the EIB, and then comparing the output files, giving an end-to-end solution for testing from soup to nuts, as we say in Ireland. As Mark mentioned earlier, what I'm going to move on to now is one of our newest features, which is our security testing functionality within Smart. As with a lot of the functionality developed in Smart, this has been based on direct requests from our customers. So let me show you exactly how you go about testing security within Smart. This can be run at any time as desired in order to give your company the confidence that security configurations are always correct. So again, I'm going to come in, I'm going to create test cases, exactly the same way that I did for the business processes, and I'm going to select this time Available Action Security. Once again, I'm going to select the tenant I want to execute this against, and I'm going to click Build Test Data. So this now allows you to test a number of different things. It allows you to check the related actions of any object in Workday. For any given employee or organization, you can check that they have or have not particular related actions to another object in Workday. An example of this would be Logan McNeil, as a HR administrator, should have the ability to hire an employee into the HR department. So how do we go about doing that? So the first thing that I need to do is, first thing you'll see is it's extremely similar to how we did the business process. So I'm going to select as an initiator who's actually going to do this test, Mark Navarro. Again, we see that Mark has been selected automatically. He's the only one in the system. Now, what object types can you test using this security functionality? Well, there's three different. There's organization, position, and worker. So for the first example, I'm going to show you how to test against a position. So I select position and click next. So what position do I want to check that Mark Navarro can have or can access related actions of? So I'm going to look for the sales proposal specialist. Again, Smart goes off, it brings back a list of the sales proposal specialists. There's only one, so I'm going to click select. Now I have the ability to specify any possible related action that can be associated with the position within Workday. As you can see from the drop-down, these are presented to me. So for the purpose of this test, I'm going to check that Mark Navarro can do or not do three different tests against the sales proposal specialist position. So the first one is, can he view job history? So I select that and I'm going to click add. Can he add Marco Silva to the employee process? And I'm going to add that. And can he do a default compensation change, a request a default compensation change? And do that. So these have been added down here now. As you can see, we have a toggle here that says visible. So this is when you're checking what Mark Navarro can or cannot do. So he should be able to see, he should not be able to see view job history. He should not be able to add employees to the process, but he should be able to, but he should be able to do a request default compensation change. So again, we've said he shouldn't be able to see, he shouldn't be able to see, he should be able to see. So let me click next on that. Again, let's give it a test case AID. So POS security 001 and a description. Position security. Click add test case. And once again, I'm going to click on generate. Again, exactly the same as the business process. This opens up an Excel spreadsheet for me. Let me just enable the editing on that and click to the available Action Security tab. Now, what we will see here in columns B and C onwards are the tests that we have actually created. So we're checking position security, logging in as Mark Navarro, we're checking against the position sales proposal specialist, and we have specified what Mark should or should not be able to see. So he shouldn't be able to see view job history, he shouldn't be able to see compensation review process, add employee to process, and he should be able to see request default compensation change. Again, this is very important because if you think about when you're moving into UAT in implementations and giving access to Workday to a wider audience, if someone goes in and sees something they shouldn't be able to see, unfortunately a human can't rescind like Workday can. So this is a good way of checking that people can and cannot do only what they're supposed to be able to can and cannot do or can and cannot see. So let me go. I'm going to save this to my desktop and click save. So let me once again flick back to Smart, and I'm going to create a test run to test that what I think should happen in Workday does actually happen in Workday. So again, I click on create, and this time I'm going to select security test. I'm going to select my available action security. Again, I'm going to give it a good test run name, so position security test, and I'm going to upload the spreadsheet that I've just created. Again, exactly the same way as I have for my business processes. In we go, select the file I've just created, click on Done, and again save the test run. So the test run again, I'm brought back to my landing page. Once again, I can select which tenant I want to run this against. I'm going to select my Kainos PT2, and I'm going to click on Execute. So this now takes a few seconds to actually run. As you can imagine, in the background, it's going in, it's checking if Mark Navarro has the options that we have selected. So while that's happening, let me just show you very quickly how you do that for a worker. Again, I'm going to select Create Test Cases. I'm going to select the Available Action Security, as I have done, against our Kainos PT2 tenant, and Build Test Data. So this time, I want to once again log in as Mark Navarro, and I'm going to select Type Worker and click Next. So what workers do I want to check if Mark Navarro can access the related actions from? So I'm going to select Marco Silva once more, and again show you that for worker security, there's a new list of actions supplied, and these are coming again from the tenant, all the actions that are possible against a worker within your Workday tenant. And I can go in and select a number of these in a similar way to add and check whether they should be visible or not. Clicking Next, adding in the test case ID, worker security, adding the test case, and again I would click Generate for these to generate. So rather than doing that, let me go back and actually see what's happened for the position security test. As we can see, this has completed, but it hasn't passed, so let's see why. So we click in, we can see our test has completed, but it's failed. Again, I'm interested to see why this happens, so I click in and I drive in a little bit further. So let's look at the bottom two first. We expected that Mark Navarro would not be able to add an employee to the process of a position. He actually wasn't, and this is passed, which is great. And we also expected that he would be able to request default compensation change for that position, and he is able to do it, and that's passed. But here's something that we were expecting to happen that hasn't. So we expected that Mark Navarro would not be able to view the job history for the sales proposal specialist position. He actually can. Now, this is a good stage where you go, well, is this something that we've missed in design? Is this something that is correct? You know, it gets you thinking that should Mark be able to do this or not? So how do we verify that he cannot or cannot in this stage, or that he can actually see it in this stage? So again, there's a screenshot taken, and let me just maximize this view. And as we can see, we're logged in as Mark Navarro. We're checking against the sales proposal specialist position, and we can see that he can actually view the job history from the related actions. So again, this is a good way of checking, have I actually configured my security correctly, or is it something I need to go and address right away before I expose Workday to a wider audience. So that really is how Smart works against Workday. I've shown you how to create business processes for functional testing, which is probably quite handy in system testing these in there just on their own. I've showed you how to reuse tests, but also how to sequence tests and run it with integrations, which is really good for running within UAT. And I've also showed you how to run some security tests there, which is good when transitioning from one test section to another within your Workday implementation lifecycle to ensure that only the correct people can see or do what they should be able to do. And most importantly, the reuse functionality, which once you've gone live, you can rerun these tests over and over and again against your post-go live sandbox tenant. So Mark, I think I'll just pass back over to you. That's the live demo has now completed.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Will. It was a very informative demonstration. So now I'm just going to take you through some of the benefits your organization could reap should you choose to subscribe to Kainos Smart. So all testing in general will go through cycles. So what you're seeing here is a comparison of manual testing versus Kainos Smart. Okay, so for manual testing, you'll input an amount of money and resources in order to complete your cycle of testing. So with Smart, there is an initial investment of time and effort as well, but because of the power of automation and reusability, it will only be a fraction of the investment when compared to the manual approach. So as you move through your cycles, because of the reuse functionality within Kainos Smart, the differential between the investments in testing starts to grow. So for the manual approach, in order to achieve the same results you got the last time, you must invest the same time, money and resources as you did for the previous cycle. So as you have seen in Kainos Smart, because of the reuse functionality, the investment is a fraction of what it would be for the first cycle. So the more cycles you execute, the greater the difference will be between the investments of money and effort in the manual approach versus utilizing Kainos Smart as part of your overall testing strategy. So in conclusion, if we take a look at some of the business benefits that we would expect, and this is what's being reported from our client base. So we would expect a 50% reduction in cost and effort associated with implementation testing, an 80% reduction in cost and effort associated with update testing. So obviously our reuse functionality and our bulk comparison tool will bring huge benefits with update testing. And alongside that, Kainos Smart will allow you to significantly improve your test quality and increase your test coverage without having to add people to your test team. So ultimately, we want you to maximize your investment in Workday. So that concludes our presentation. So we're now going to go through some questions that we've been sending in. If we don't get to all of them, we will follow up with you after individually. So I'd say feel free to note your questions through the questions feature now. So I suppose I'll take the first one, Will. It's here, how is Smart sold? So as we mentioned, Smart is a software as a service model. So you would subscribe to the service, and the price is actually based on the number of employees that you have in your Workday configuration, where we'd be more than happy to follow up with you afterwards to give you individual pricing on that. Okay, the next question coming in here is what size companies can use Smart? So with that, if you're a Workday customer, you can get value from Smart, so that's regardless of size. It's just as long as you're a Workday customer. We do have an entry-level price point for smaller organizations, so again, that's something we're more than happy to share with you individually after. Will, I've got one for you here, so it's is Workday Financials part of your product?
Apologies there, I was just on mute. Not at the moment, Mark, but it really is the next large area that we want to move into. So we have targeted this for release in Q2 of next year. Again, we should have had the Workday Safe Harbor agreement up in front before we actually showed any of this, but that is on our roadmap. It is what we're working on at the moment, and we are planning Q2 next year for that.
Okay, thanks for that, Will. The next question here is kind of a follow-on to that, is can you share your product roadmap? So unfortunately we can't on an open webinar like this to protect our IP, but we can with NDAs in place. So again, we'd be more than happy to do that on an individual basis after the webinar. Will, I suppose I've got one for you here. It's can I edit the Excel spreadsheets to contain test cases manually?
Absolutely. As I showed there earlier, Mark, the way I know I use Smart is by creating my initial tests using WBTC, and what I would do then is I would copy that across into the columns next to it and make the edits that I need. You know, there's a number of benefits for that. One being it's quite quick to do. You can see very quickly the matrix that you want to actually complete, but also I can do it offline. If I'm on the bus on the way home or something, you know, I can pull out my laptop and I can be very quickly creating these ready for me to run when I get to Smart the next time.
Cool, thanks for that. I suppose the next question here would be for you as well. It's are you storing data in the cloud, and how is your data securely stored?
Yeah, this is probably one of the most common questions we get asked, particularly you know, when we start talking to potential new clients for the first time. So there is some data actually stored in the cloud, and what that would be is probably what you've seen there. It's the test spreadsheets themselves, because we want to give you the ability to reuse what's there, but also the screenshots of what you've seen for any errors, and that they are stored. But so because we have both EU and North American customers, we obviously have data centers in both locations. But our security model in Smart is to trust nobody, so all data is encrypted in transit and in rest. We don't have the decryption keys. You know, our product is very, very secure, and we'd be happy to go through that, you know, on an individual basis with anyone that wants to know more information about it.
Okay, thanks for that. I suppose the next one here will be for you as well. In the demo, Smart appeared to be logging in and out as multiple users. Is this correct, and how is it managed?
I think there's lots there for you, Mark, and you just don't want to answer them. But no, you're absolutely right. So as I mentioned and sort of showed you in the video, Smart interacts with Workday to find out where to go next in the business process, and also who is to, you know, be the actor to do the next step within the business process. So once we know that, we do, one of the prerequisites of Smart is that we have a certain user that can do a very, very limited number of things, and one of those is the ability to change the password. So we will change the password to an unknown password. Again, as I mentioned, we can't decrypt it in any way, and we'll log in and continue on the business process in that way. Now, one of the things that we are obviously looking at, and again is on our roadmap, is to utilize the new proxy feature that Workday have recently introduced. I know I love it for testing, as I know a lot of our clients do as well, and we will be giving the ability to use proxy also in the future, which will negate the need for this password resetting.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll stop picking on you for now. So the next question is, can I use Smart against my production tenant? So I'll fill that one in. You can't run any automation against your production tenant. You can only run Smart against your test tenants. So the next question here is, does Kainos still provide the reports to populate the test cases? So there's two options which we'll allude to in the demonstration. You can use the test case wizard to create your test cases, but you also have the option of manipulating the spreadsheets, as we'll show you through in the presentation. We'll hand over the next one here to you. That's sorry, how often will I need to change the automation scripts behind Smart?
Yeah, I suppose this is the beauty of Smart as well, Mark. I've worked in test automation for far longer than I care to admit, and one of the challenges of test automation is always making sure that your automation scripts, in this case Selenium, are up to date with the latest version of code that you want to run them against. A prime example of that is you know, recently Workday changed their whole UI from Flex to HTML5. So if you weren't using Smart and you wanted to write your own automation, you would have had to rewrite it all. But the beauty of Smart is that that's what we do. We look after the maintenance of all the automated scripts. We look after the updating of them so that they're always up to date with the latest version of Workday. Again, going back to your first or second slide there, Mark, our unique position to be able to do that because of our very close working relationship with Workday. So it does allow you know, clients of Smart to actually just concentrate on the data that they need to enter and the tests that they need to run, rather than having to worry about the maintenance or even the creation of any automation scripts.
Thank you very much for that, Will. I think we'll leave it there. I'd like to thank you all for giving up your time today to join us, and with that I'll hand back over to Jill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Will. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Kainos Smart Automated Testing for Workday Implementations. If you have any other questions, please contact smart@kainos.com. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Kainos and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.